While younger men waste their energy chasing female validation and approval, mature men who master Marcus Aurelius's Stoic principles develop a magnetic presence that makes women feel naturally drawn to them and secure in their company. Over 2,000 years ago, this philosopher-emperor discovered that true attractive power doesn't come from physical appearance or money, but from the quiet inner strength you demonstrate through 9 specific techniques of emotional self-control and authentic presence. These men don't chase, they attract through their emotional stability, wisdom earned through experience, and genuine confidence that only maturity can provide. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment what part of the world you're watching from. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. When was the last time you stopped in the middle of your day, truly paused and asked yourself, who at this moment is real menti no control dominia experiencia? Your next decision? Perhaps you have felt, as most do, that subtle tremor beneath the surface, a flash of impatience with a colleague, a compulsive urge to check messages for validation, or a sudden spike of anxiety when things do not unfold precisely as you hoped. There is a kind of weather in every soul, and to become a true governor of your own inner climate is one of life's rarest achievements. This quiet sovereignty, this autodominio, is neither simple repression nor cold discipline. Instead, it is akin to cultivating a calm river within yourself, one that flows unhurried but irresistibly steady, no matter how many storms lash the banks from the outside. If you attend carefully to those people who move through the world with an unusual tranquility, you will begin to sense the defining trait that sets them apart. It is not the absence of emotion, it is not a bland neutrality. Rather, it is a gentle but unshakable command over their own presenza, containment and warmth that draws others in effortlessly, as if some gravitational force encircles them. Imagine standing beside a mountain at dusk. In its serene immensity, something quiets your breath and gestures for the scattered parts of yourself to return home. This is the magnetism of the person who governs himself, whose serenity is not a performance, but the natural expression of inner order. Wouldn't you prefer to be such a person, to radiate that quiet confidence that requires nothing of others, a presence so grounded that it soothes rather than stirs? And so, we come to the ancient discipline of Stoicism, not as a cold withdrawal from the passions, but as a fierce and luminous self-mastery that begins where few dare to look, at the bright-hot core of your own impulses and moods. For what truly is self-mastery, if not the art of keeping your internal center steady, even as the winds of feeling and circumstance attempt to tilt you off axis? Picture yourself in the midst of romantic tension. Perhaps you are sitting across from someone whose opinions sharply differ from yours. The conversation growing taut, heat gathering beneath your skin. The immature mind rushes to defend and to conquer, to make the other yield. The enslaved mind bends in stem-mortgaging dignity for fleeting validation. But the man who has made a habit of pause, who knows the value of conscious inaction, simply breathes. He lets a silent gap bloom between stimulus and response. He regards the storm within without becoming it. His voice, when it comes, is measure richer with slow rhythm, his eyes steady and kind, posture unbroken by the charge in the air. There is immense power in these micro-habits, seemingly trivial in isolation, revolutionary by accumulation. The mature man does not wait for chaos to test him. He shapes his day so that each transition, leaving his bed at dawn, sitting to work, closing the day at night, becomes an opportunity to reaffirm who is in command. He wakes not to notifications, but to a purposeful breath. Mornings are shielded by simple rituals, perhaps a cup of coffee prepared with patient hands, or a quiet journaling session that clarifies the emotional landscape of the day ahead. The start of the day is a rampart, the night, a gentle landing. Sleep is protected, not sacrificed to the liturgy of endless scrolling. Screens are put to rest, dreams given time to arrive. There are boundaries, intentionally placed, around labor, play, and rest so that no single aspect may colonize the entire mind. The sum effect is a life of emotional predictability, not dullness, but the profound comfort of stability. Others will notice this. In the context of romantic encounters, the signature of real self-mastery is as subtle as it is unmistakable. The way the conversation unfolds like an unhurried river, how each word lands calmly, each look lingers without grasping, each silence is allowed to exist without panic. There is no torrent of convincing, no compulsive need to perform or contort oneself to fit an imagined ideal. Instead, there is simply presence and anchoring, assurance, communicated in the cadence of breath, the tilt of the head, the depth of listening that invites the other to truly be seen. Women are exquisitely attuned to this kind of emotional steadiness. It is felt in the absence of desperation, in the refusal to chase or to mold oneself for approval. The mature man, inwardly abundant, says without a hint of arrogance, "I choose to be here. I bring my fullness to this moment, but my well-being is not for sale." And so the paradox. What arises is an elevated value, offered freely, never manipulated or begged for. Consider now the practical heart of this philosophy, these tools offered by the Stoics across centuries. The first, and perhaps the most humble, is the practice of emotional journaling. As you end each day, or whenever a surge of feeling begins to cloud the mind, take to paper or a private voice memo and begin with the simple naming of your emotion. I am irritated. I am anxious. I am hopeful. Do not flee from the feeling. Approach it as you would a tentative animal. Notate the circumstances that gave rise to the feeling, creating space between yourself and your automatic reactions. In this act of noticing, rather than fusing with the mood, already you begin the work of ruling yourself. Over time, patterns will emerge. A particular person, situation, or thought consistently tugs the leash of your peace. As you name and notice these patterns, proceed to the third step, nurturing. Consider in gentle but honest terms what this emotion is requesting from you: attention, boundaries, adjustment, or perhaps just patient acceptance. The second practice is the premeditatio malorum, the mindful rehearsal of setbacks before they arrive. At the start of each week, close your eyes for a moment and walk through the landscape of your upcoming days. Picture the obstacles, interruptions at work, a difficult conversation, plans that unravel. Imagine yourself responding not with fluster or complaint, but with the grace of a practiced sailor. If this happens, how do I choose to respond? You rehearse calm. You build, in the safety of your imagination, a library of responses, so that when the real winds come, your inner captain is already awake. In the context of romance, this becomes especially vital. Imagine the date that does not go as planned, the moment your vulnerability is not met as hoped, the text message unanswered. In each scenario, return to the core question: what is within my control? Here, you reach for the ancient dichotomy. I can control my presence, my honesty, my clarity. The rest, outcome, reaction, acceptance, or rejection, belongs to fate, to the river of life outside my hands. This is no cosmic resignation, no passive standing by. Rather, it is the deepest assertion of power possible. Pouring your effort wholeheartedly into the realm of your own actions, never squandering energy on what is fundamentally not yours to command the weather, the moods of others, the roll of the dice. In romance, this is the source of a rare, sustainable attraction, the peace that radiates when drama is left at the door, when focus reigns instead of fireworks. The self-governed man becomes a lighthouse, calm in his beam, unfazed by the churning sea. Do you recognize perhaps that this tranquility is becoming rare in our times? Ours is the century of chronic noise, of anxious seeking after likes and replies, of identities so fragile they fracture with every disagreement or delay. And yet, even now, the authentic aura of someone who is not a slave to his own moods, who regulates his state before managing others, becomes an invaluable currency. Security and comfort become his unintended gifts to those around him. Friends, lovers, even strangers are drawn to this rare predictable that, with this person, you will not be lashed by random storms, not forced to take emotional cover. What can it look like, day by day, to install these practices? Picture yourself, for example, about to reply to a message that bristles with misunderstanding. Instead of unleashing your instinctual response, you take a slow breath, letting 15 seconds pass before your fingers move. You are not suppressing yourself. You are gathering your resources. Or imagine, after a harsh day, how easy it might be to bury your discomfort with screen time or substances. Instead, you opt for a walk, letting your stride settle the dust in your thoughts. These are the small, quiet moments where self-mastery is one never in the spotlight, always in the wings. In relationships, there is a transforming magic when you become the person whose sense of peace is not contingent upon the actions of the other. You do not withhold affection to punish, nor do you lavish it to bribe. You give as you choose, because the choosing is yours. You maintain eye contact even amidst conflict, not as a test, but as a statement. I am present. I do not flee from the storm. Even in moments of rejection or disappointment, you nurse your own wounds with honesty but without melodrama, trusting that the only indispensable love is the one you offer yourself first. A simple but profound way to anchor this every day is to establish a brief, non-negotiable ritual at both sunrise and sunset. Upon waking, before reaching for your device, sit quietly, place your hand over your chest, and breathe slowly, naming 2 intentions for your coming hours, perhaps to remain patient in conversation, to resist the urge to interrupt, to keep humor light. At dusk, as you prepare for sleep, take another 5 minutes to journal 3 occurrences in which you felt yourself wobble. What triggered your impatience, your defensiveness, your need for validation? And, crucially, how did you respond? With each new day, these moments become easier to spot first after the fact, then in real time, and finally, before they even arrive. Eventually, the mind shifts. Reaction is replaced by deliberation. Drama gives way to clarity. Importantly, self-mastery does not equate to perfection. There will be moments when you fail your own standards, when you are curt, when you lose your cool, when a passing insecurity sneaks past your gatekeeping. The art, then, is not in never falling, but in how you rise, with candor, forgiveness, and above all with a refusal to let setbacks define the next hour, let alone the next day. Each instance becomes compost for future strength. Growth is a spiral, not a straight line. Let us return for a moment to the social context, to how others sense this discipline without a word being spoken. In group settings, you are the one whose laughter is deep and timed, not frantic or seeking. In disagreement, you stand your ground without uprooting the relationship. Your boundaries become silent cues, gently fencing off disrespect or intrusion. If someone presses, you respond not with aggression, but with unwavering poise. I am unwilling, at this hour, to compromise my rest. Perhaps we continue this tomorrow. There is a deep sweetness in these moments. Respect is magnetized not by force, but by consistency. In romance, the effects are more profound still. Imagine a situation where your invitation to a date is met with uncertainty or delay. Rather than over-investing, spiraling into anxiety, or pleading for attention, you simply note the reply, respond with cordiality, and move on with your evening. Later, you review the exchange in your journal, learning what you can, but refusing to dwell. The detachment is not coldness, but a strong assertion. I share my time and presence only where they grow, not where they are begged for. This is abundance in action. Attraction, when rooted in such calmness, ceases to be theatrical. It matures, sustainable as a forest. A final reflection, then. Consider how a man who truly governs himself touches not just the course of his own life, but the ripples he sends outward, forming a safe harbor for loved ones, a beacon for friends, a source of rare ballast in a world too often adrift. Every day, in countless micro-choices, he signals, peace is possible, calm is strength, sovereignty is attainable not through domination of others, but through consecutive, humble returns to one's own core. If you find yourself yearning for more of thistless noise, less reactivity, more breath, more slowness, take heart in the journey ahead. This kind of mastery is never instant. It is earned, hour by hour. But with each step, you become not only less rattled, but far more radiant light, not only undisturbed by the world, but secretly, gently, illuminating it for everyone else along the way. If you have lived any fragment of this reality, If this is something you long to embody, I welcome you to share your reflections, your struggles, your practices below. What has helped you in tough moments to remain your own captain? What rituals, however small, have gentled your storms? In this echo chamber of everyday life, know that every attempt at sovereignty, however imperfect, is a win not just for you, but for everyone graced by your presence. Perhaps, as you listen and feel the calming echoes of sovereignty settling over your inner world, this sense that self-mastery is not just a dream but a series of practiced, attainable micro-actions you notice, like the hush after a rainstorm. Another kind of question rising from beneath the surface of your life. Once you taste the first hints of inner governance, your thoughts naturally turn to a deeper purpose. For what end do you steady yourself each morning? Why summon self-command, build rituals of order, resist the tidal pull of distraction? Serenity, in isolation, cannot suffice as a final destination. It is only the foundation on which you build, a clearing in the forest from which the next journey begins. If you have ever lain awake, staring at the ceiling in the quiet depth of the night, and felt the gentle ache for something that outlasts fleeting pleasures, for something to move toward, to serve, to uphold long after applause has faded, then you are already on that path. At the heart of a life truly well lived lies direction, not drift, a gravitational center that shapes your days, arranges your joys and trials, and gives every sacrifice a quiet nobility. And that center is called purpose. Have you ever wondered about the difference between a life that feels cohesive, gathered, and meaningful, and a life frayed at the edges, forever scattered by every invitation, every trivial demand, every passing wave of restlessness? It is not accidental that the ancient Stoics placed the idea of living in accordance with nature at the summit of their philosophy. To them, nature meant not simply trees and wind, but the unique shape of your own deepest calling, your why, inscribed like rings within the wood of your soul. Without this axis, even the most impressive self-mastery can become brittle, like a ship at sea with no star to follow. And with it, even the most ordinary life gathers a remarkable gravitia power that quietly draws the right people, the right opportunities, the right resonance into your orbit. Reflect for a moment on the men and women throughout your own life who seem, almost magnetically, to attract trust, respect, and admiration. Notice how this draw is rarely a matter of clever strategy or relentless effort. Instead, you feel it in the quiet coherence of their actions. The way their no is unsentimental but rooted, their yes consistent with some larger thread running through all they do. There is no braggadocio or grandstanding, only a calm force that organizes what they accept and what they decline. Consider the difference between one who chases validation in every careless message, restless for approval, and one who guards his time fiercely, segments his attention with the same deliberate care as a jeweler selecting stones, and says no regularly, not to shut the world out, but to preserve the vessel of his own becoming. In such people, you sense a kind of inner architecture, a structure of priorities, seemingly invisible but deeply felt. It is this architecture, this gravitational discipline, that allows you to distinguish purpose from the numbing current of mere pleasure chasing. It may help to imagine your purpose not as a grand, abstract career goal, but as the living current that runs through your most honorable values. Purpose is your North Star, but also the field in which your most ordinary days are planted. It might be the craft of your work, approached with respect, the legacy you nourish in your children or students, the care you offer in volunteer service, the art you dare to make even when the audience is invisible. The ancient Stoics taught that without a sense of higher mission, something that persists through boredom and pain, and even invisibility a days, will collapse into a festival of distractions, tiny compulsive pleasures, insufficient to fuel a single season, let alone a lifetime. Now, how does all this relate to the quiet, sustainable attraction we explored earlier? In the context of connection, intimacy, romance, and friendship, purpose functions as the mysterious but unmistakable signal that you are already full before you arrive. You are not seeking someone to complete you, to fill the hollow places of a life without direction. Instead, your orbit is strong enough to pull another into meaningful harmony, not through control, but through invitation. There is something unmistakably attractive about a person who, in subtle ways, makes it clear that they live for a purpose bigger than the shallow endorphin rush of every whim. Their agenda is generous, stretches forward in time, and is consistent enough that you do not need to guess where you stand. When someone protects their focus, declines temptations that are misaligned, celebrates empty days, not with irritation but with gratitude, for the margin in which real life can unfold, that is when you feel the rare security of being with a person not chasing the wind. In the real world, everything conspires to tempt you away from this. Invitations flood your inbox. Social media whispers of experiences you must not miss. Your own fatigue pulls you toward the path of least resistance. But those grounded in purpose check each incoming request, not against the standard of short-term pleasure, but with a longer, deeper question. Does this choice align with my greater commitments? Does this detour fragment me? Or does it enrich the story I am writing with my minutes, my seasons, my years? True purpose is not the enemy of joy. It is what sorts true joy from the fleeting buzz of distraction, so that even moments of relaxation and play are chosen, not stumbled into. When purpose is alive and awake inside you, even leisure becomes a kind of nourishment, never an escape. Imagine, for instance, the difference between the person who feels obligated to say yes to every social engagement, fearing exclusion or missing out, and the one who, with uncomplicated steadiness, preserves Sabbath-like spaces in his calendar. He is not drifting toward gatherings by inertia, is investing in them only when aligned with rest, curiosity, or genuine connection. And when he invites someone into his life, whether for a coffee, a hike, or a shared experience, the fidelity between his purpose and his proposals becomes evident. Instead of orchestrating elaborate performances to impress, he suggests activities that reflect his own values. An evening at a local poetry reading, a long walk in the hills with quiet conversation, a bookshop rendezvous such proposal signals coherence, not spectacle. The invitation is always, come with me into the current of a life that is already flowing, never stagnant, never in need of performance. This way of living also makes time, your most precious resource, serve something greater than oppressive routine. When purpose is a conscious presence, your schedule ceases to be a prison and becomes a vessel. Invitations and requests are filtered not through the lens of urgent obligation, but through the framework of values. A quiet afternoon alone is no longer an embarrassment or a failure to be socially relevant. It is an investment in focused energy, in clarity, in replenishment, in next steps toward the goals that frame your days. It is not that pleasure becomes irrelevant or villainous, but that pleasure is given its appropriate seat in the back row, never allowed to command the stage for long. This approach radiates trustworthiness in the eyes of those around you, even perhaps especially in the romantic sphere. When you reach out for an encounter, every detail reflects purposeful living. You do not propose the predictable, showy dinner where noise replaces substance, but choose something that mirrors the axis of your own values, inviting your companion to glimpse the world through your lens. Your choices communicate. Whether or not you say, yes, I would be here doing this, you are being invited into something authentic, not a circus. The clarity and congruence of these actions dissolve much of the unseen anxiety that pollutes early encounters. There is nothing to decode, no double meanings, no suspicion that your offering is different from your truth. The very predictability of your focus liberates the other from doubt, allowing attraction to grow where performance would otherwise wilt it. And yet, living on purpose is anything but a passive, once-and-done declaration. It requires regular, disciplined renewal. There is wisdom, then, in dedicating a page in your journal to a living vision statement, a personal declaration, written in your own voice, that captures the North Star you strive toward. This does not have to be grand. Sometimes, a single sentence is enough. I create meaning through honest work and gentle presence. My life is for my family's legacy and for sharing beauty where I can. Service is my axis. Revisit these words every week, refining and clearing them until they amplify your sense of direction rather than constrain it. Similarly, the Stoic tradition offers a simple but profound method for quarterly self-organization. Take a morning 4 times each year to establish your personal objectives and key results. Ask yourself what outcomes would bring you closer to the person you wish to become, in work, in love. What, lovingly but honestly, do I abandon because it is no longer a fit for my deeper mission? This is not the tyrannical productivity system pushed by the culture of evermore, but a gentler, wiser curating of what truly matters. There is a test, famously attributed to Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, whose personal reflections still pulse with relevance, almost 2 millennia later. In moments of decision or temptation, he asks, "Does this help me become the person I wish to be?" Asked not once, but 100 times each week, this question becomes a bell that calls your scattered parts back to alignment. When you are standing at the fork between pleasure and purpose, between scrolling mindlessly and going for a run, between the comfort of shallow company and the risk of deeper vulnerability, Marcus's words summon you not to renunciation, but to remembering. Will this, 5 years hence, be remembered as a moment of becoming or a moment of erosion? Purpose also has a subtler, more protective quality. It becomes a filter that shields you from attachments that might otherwise waste your years in performative connection. When you live from purpose, compatibility emerges naturally. Those drawn to distraction for its own sake will find no convenient hook in you. Your boundaries become obvious, even beautiful. To those with similar values, and those looking for spectacle usually vanish of their own accord, sparing all involved from needless drama. If this all sounds rigid, if the voice of your inner critic whispers that life should be lighter, less orchestrated, remember, when pleasure is placed in service to purpose, life loses none of its joy. In fact, the opposite happens. Every laugh, every spontaneous adventure, every restful pause becomes sweeter, because it is chosen, congruent, and never the fruit of guilt or empty compulsion. Your days are both woven and wild, your schedule a net that lets you catch what nourishes and lets the dross fall away. When you live in this manner, the very quality of your relationships deepens. Friends, partners, even passing acquaintances come to sense that you are not measuring your worth by their reactions or approval. The social theatre, the constant calibration of self for applause, fades in favor of a more authentic gravity. Opportunities, whether for collaboration, romance, or friendship, find their way to you not because you chased them, but because like finds like. Your vision, your clarity, your rhythm attract those resonant with your mission. There is no need for masks. It is inevitable, on this path, to experience friction. People may not always understand your refusals, your hunger for solitude, your preference for substance over spectacle. At times, you may doubt yourself, worry that focus means missing out, that boundaries are a kind of coldness. These are ancient fears, but each time resistance arises, pause and ask again, is this invitation pulling me off my axis or returning me to it? Over the years, your allegiance to purpose forges self-respect deeper than any fleeting praise ever could. Purpose is also a gift you quietly offer to others. When you are steadfast and rooted, those in your orbit feel safer, less entangled in second-guessing, less worried you will vanish at the first sign of discomfort. The steadiness of your mission becomes a shore for others' turbulence. Sometimes, merely being in the presence of someone so centered is enough to awaken courage or curiosity in other stow, grant them space to ask their own questions about direction, alignment, and meaning. It is important not to mistake the trappings of purpose for the real current beneath. You may be praised for your discipline, admired for your focus, envied for your productivity, but these outer forms must remain, always, the servants of an inner axis you continually test and refine. That is why the review, week by week, quarter by quarter, is so essential. You are not an automaton, but a living thing, always changing, always called to adapt as your seasons shift. Before you close your eyes tonight, or before you take that next step into tomorrow's fog of obligation, dare to ask yourself, what few things, if made my own, would bring such coherence to my time that pleasure and duty no longer war with each other? What intentions, if announced quietly to myself, would make it easier to say no without resentment and yes without fear? Write them down, speak them aloud, let them settle in the deep well at the center of you. Purpose does not demand perfection, nor does it promise that you will always feel sure. There will be days when you forget your why, when the old tides of distraction or self-doubt sweep in. When this happens, treat yourself as you would a dear friend lost in a storm, with patience, forgiveness, and gentle reminders. Begin again. Each sunrise is a new invitation, each interruption a moment to practice returning to axis. What matters is not the grand arc of achievement, but the 100 small returns to direction, the silent declaration each ordinary evening. My life has a shape, my days have a center. I invite you now, as you breathe with me in this shared moment, to consider, where are you living on autopilot, and where are you living on purpose? Which invitations are you accepting because you are afraid to disappoint, and which are you embracing because they are in harmony with your truest aims? If you wish, share your reflections in the comments below your vision statement, your stumbling blocks, your humble successes. Let us make this a gathering ground for those quietly determined to live beyond the tyranny of shallow pleasure and into the brighter, steadier gravity of meaning. You are not alone. Each person who listens, who writes, who returns even once to their own purpose, strengthens the invisible tie that connects us across these ordinary but holy hours. With purpose, you become a source not just of your own fulfillment, but of a gentle light by which others may also find their way. May you rest tonight and rise tomorrow, with that North Star quietly visible even, if only as a trembling glimmer above the city lights. And as you sit quietly, reflecting on the subtle but unwavering thread that purpose weaves through the very fabric of each ordinary day, perhaps you begin to sense that something even more immediate calls to be brought into the light of your attention. For all this talk of direction, intention, self-mastery, and the architecture of a meaningful life, what truly roots you, moment by moment, inside the living now, weaving time into a continuous, tangible fabric, instead of a blur of fleeting impressions. Can you remember the last time you were utterly, extravagantly present, not just going through motions, but inhabited by a kind of deep anchoring, the kind that makes the ticking of each minute a meditation and not a measurement? This is the tender paradox at the heart of a meaningful existence. While purpose organizes the arc of your days, it is presence that endows each one with its richness and its savor. Presence is the very soil in which the seeds of purpose are sown, the deep water that nourishes becoming beneath all outer action. It is what lets you encounter the realities of your life, not as abstractions or rumor, but as living, breathing experiences, fully engaged and irreducibly whole. And in a world relentlessly splintered by notification, demand, and divided attention, the simple gift of presence has become the rare stand, therefore, the most precious currency in all of human relationship. You know the difference instinctively, even if you have never spoken the words. Think back to a moment when you sat across from someone who was truly with you, their body relaxed, their eyes attentive, their breath not hurried, their mind uncluttered by agenda. Maybe they asked a question, but more than that, their silence after your reply gave you permission to linger. Perhaps they said little, but the hum of their focus made you feel, for those few moments, like the only person in the world. In that stillness, you found not only intimacy, but also safety, not performance, but the raw relief of being received. This, you know, is the sacred landscape of radical presence, and the absence of it, you also know, can wound more deeply than any spoken slight. The distracted companion who glances past you, the friend who listens only half-heartedly, the lover whose hand goes to their phone in the hush between sentence, each small fissure breaks the vessel of connection just a little more, until eventually you feel yourself drifting, unmoored, half there and half gone. Nothing in modern life conspires more forcefully to prevent real presence than the technologies and anxieties designed to addict and fragment you. And so it is no wonder that the undivided attention of another has become a form of medicine, a healing, a signal, a reconnection with something old and necessary inside you. To live in this way is not an accident. Radical presence is a choice, sometimes tender, sometimes fierce-made, and remade in each hour. It requires you to slow the currents that rush through your mind, to unlearn the reflexes that pull you always elsewhere, to surrender for a few holy minutes the myth of multitasking. And in the context of relationship in the realm of intimacy and attraction, it is nothing short of a superpower. Presence is what lets you cut through the static, offering not the spectacle of flawless performance, but instead the deep humility of being fully here. Body, mind, and soul united, with nothing held back and nothing projected forward. If you have ever felt anxious on a first meeting, aware of your own hands, monitoring every word, then you know the pain of divided presence. The measure of your being is split off with yourself, half with the impression you believe you must manufacture. But what if you could step off that stage entirely? What if instead you grounded yourself in each new moment, trusting that whatever is real is also enough? The Stoic tradition offers not just the wisdom of coping with external fate, but the practical art of inhabiting each breath as it happens. Imagine beginning each encounter with a quiet, grounding moment, spent feeling your own feet against the earth or the chair, a handful of breaths drawn gently in and out, a silent reminder of the very air inside your chest. You are not arriving as a resume or a character, but as an open field of attention. When you listen from this state, when you turn the fullness of your hearing, your seeing, your gentle curiosity outward, something remarkable unfolds. The person before you relaxes, their speech slows, their own nervous gestures soften. It is as if your presence gives them room to be, to set down their burdens, even if for only a conversation's span. Instead of firing questions to fill the silence, or searching for clever things to say, you let your awareness rest on subtler cues, the flicker of their eyelids, the warmth in their voice, the invisible arc of their meaning beneath the words. You are not hungry to impress or to guide the discussion to the safety of your practiced anecdotes. Presence is a living inquiry, a fresh invitation to whatever is actually here. You might discover that it is only in these silences, these spacious pauses, that true connection can germinate. When you are tempted to fill every lull with chatter, to steer, to control, or to seek reassurance, remind yourself, the gold is in the gaps. Let there be intervals where nothing is accomplished, where no armor is presented, where the sole act is the quiet, radical achievement of being together. And in this, the cadence of your voice changes. It drops in intensity, becomes slower, more textured, filled not with urgency, but with an anchored warmth. Your presence becomes physical, not just a stream of words, but an embodied invitation communicated through breath and posture, as much as argument or explanation. There are small, practical ways to make presence a habit rather than an accident. One is to create conscious rituals at the start of any significant interaction. Before you step into a meeting, or an intimate conversation, or a gathering, take a single minute to drop your attention from the whirlwind of thought into a part of your body, a gentle awareness of your breath, the sensation of your hands, the press of your feet into the floor. Invite yourself back, over and over, to the bodily reality that anchors almost every storm of mind. Even as the pressure rises when conversation grows heated, or boredom threatens, or social anxiety mounts, this return to embodiment acts as a compass, a tether back to what is real and unrepeatable. And when distractions tempt you away, as they inevitably do, name them gently and with humor. I notice my mind wants to rehearse my next reply, or I see myself glancing over your shoulder for validation. In naming, you reclaim agency. There is no shame here, only the perpetual practice of return, the quiet courage of starting again, now and now and now, as many times as you need. Presence also demands that you relinquish the relentless urge to prove yourself. There is a reflex, strong in many, to parade achievements, to demonstrate value through what the Stoic calls the emotional curriculum, a kind of performative resume of suffering, victory, or desirability. The The most transformative presence is born not from trying to be chosen, but from the deep, unhurried curiosity that wants only to know. Ask not, how am I being judged? But rather, what is waiting to be discovered here, in this person, in this moment, in myself? Practice clean curiosity, a mode of inquiry that is neither invasive nor agenda-driven, but wide open. Questions become tools for exploration, not interrogation. When someone shares a passion or a wound, instead of launching into your own story, linger, how did that begin for you? Or what animates you about this? Or simply, tell me more. Let these be invitations, not tests. Notice too that your attention can be trained like a muscle. Begin with the anchor of the senses, the texture of the chair beneath you, the earthy aroma of coffee wafting between you and your companion, the warmth of filtered light grazing one cheek. When the mind veers into concern over outcome or self-protection, return without drama to a sensory fact: your breath, the color of the room, the barely audible hum of a city outside. This is not a performance of interest, but the live electricity of inhabiting the present as fully as animal and child. One of the most beautiful gifts of presence is that it has the power to disarm. Defenses drop in its field, and people reveal not what they think they should reveal, but who they are beneath the role. If you want to understand this, think of the last time you felt truly seen by another, not evaluated, not fixed, not praised. Their presence made space for your own. And the paradox is that precisely because you are not casting yourself as the main character, you become unforgettable. Absence of need is irresistible. It is experienced, wordlessly, as a kind of emotional wealth. There are also environmental signals you can attune to as an architect of presence. When choosing spaces to meet, whether for romance or friendship or collaboration, calibrate the external world for depth, not for spectacle. Prefer the corner table where your voices need not compete, the gentle lamplight that flatters without dazzling, a surface between you that is clear of clutter or barrier. The environment, arranged for intimacy, is part of what allows presence to flourish. Even the subtle arrangement of chairs, the closing of extra apps on a device, the deliberate defense against ambient noise, each is an act of care in service to deeper meeting. How much of your daily anxiety, your persistent loneliness, springs not from true isolation, but from being surrounded by bodies, voices, noise, and yet never really touched by attention? It is not the number of social contacts, but the frequency of such real presence that nourishes the yearnings of the heart. Practice the discipline of single tasking. When you speak, let speaking be your whole work. When you listen, listen as if your life depends on it. Because, in a way, it does. The half-lived life is a casualty of divided focus. You may fear, at times, that such presence is too simple, too unproductive, or too vulnerable to be worthwhile. You may worry that others will mistake your quiet for disengagement, or your slowness for dullness. But notice, in a world wired for interruption and speed, what is undervalued in the market becomes all the more rare and all the more precious. Your unhurried, aware, silent presence is oxygen in the smog of hurry, gold amidst the ceaseless commerce of noise. It takes courage to slow down. It takes tenderness to permit silence. That is precisely why others remember it not as a technique or a trick, but as a turning point, a rare oasis in the heat of performance. Let me return with you, for a moment, to the tender field of relationships in flux. A first date, an encounter between dear friends long separated, a tense negotiation at work. In all these, presence communicates a message far below the threshold of language. I am here, with you, not only in body but in spirit, not skating on my own certainty or scripting my next move. And to those who are unaccustomed to such attention, let's be honest, in the 21st century, almost everyone as this feels like being recognized on a primal level. It is not overstated to say that almost all sustainable attraction is born in this field, that what cannot last outside of it quickly withers or devolves into drama, miscommunication, and loneliness, even in company. Presence, then, is not a box to check or a skill to master once and for all. It is like breath, both ever available and yet requiring constant, gentle return. Some days you will be scattered, your mind caught in the updrafts of your worries, obligations, old reflexes. Forgive yourself for this. Begin again, as many times as it takes. No moment of return is wasted. Each act of reclaiming presence, each small surrender of performance for the sake of depth, is a seed of living connection nourished not by spectacle or proof, but by the plain, radiant act of being, here and now. If this meditation touches any part of your recent experience, if you have found yourself hungering for more meaning, for a space where your attention is met and reciprocated, for evenings or mornings unmarred by the compulsions of digital interruption, I invite you to share below what practices or micro-rituals have helped you reclaim presence in your daily life. Perhaps it is a walk in the early light of day, a meal eaten slowly and in silence, a commitment to silencing the phone during conversation, a gentle breathing practice before returning home to loved ones. Perhaps it is a willingness to remain just a minute longer in the discomfort of awkward silence, allowing real intimacy a chance to surface. Each of these quiet and ordinary becomes, in the aggregate, a culture of presence, a life lived not in preview or in replay, but in the sacred incandescence of now. The gift of presence is twofold. It replenishes not only those you offer it to, but also your own spirit. In being fully here, you become available to the depths and surprises of each day, attuned not merely to outcomes, but to the living mystery of each encounter, each unfolding moment, each pause. In this, you write a new story about attention not as a commodity, but as a sacrament. May you find, in the coming hours and days, many opportunities to return gently to the present, not just for the sake of those you love, but for your own wholeness, your own peace, your own quiet joy at being here for your own fleeting, precious, irreducible life. And in this return to the radiant act of being here for your own fleeting, precious, irreducible life, you'll discover that presence opens up a space, a kind of soft, unhurried inner field where desire, hope, and intention gather. But within that field, another tension stirs, maybe more quiet, maybe a little stubborn in its movement through the body. It is the ancient dialogue between longing and letting go, between making effort and releasing the tight clutch of outcome. How often do you find yourself approaching a moment, an invitation, or a person with the heart bright and full, but in the hidden currents beneath, there pulses an anxiety and idea that your happiness depends on what happens next, won or lost, accepted or denied? It is so simple to miss, this shift from intention to need. First, you offer yourself. Then, almost by accident, you begin to calculate, to hope with an edge, to stake the balance of your internal weather on the world's reply. So allow yourself, for a few breaths, to rest in the wisdom that Stoicism offers here, a form of wisdom that sings quietly within so many old traditions, but is perhaps nowhere more distilled, more bracing and compassionate than in the practice of indifference to result. This is not the cold denial you might find in the brittle mask of apathy, nor a rejection of healthy human wanting.
Instead, it is a radical gesture of trust. Trust in yourself that your value is prior to victory. Trust in the process. Trust that life contains more possibility than the one outcome to which you cling.
Notice for a moment how much of your suffering arises not from desire itself, but from the tightening that happens when desire turns to demand. You pursue love, respect, connection, you extend invitations, or speak honestly, or lean in to touch another, and in these gestures you are not wrong. But watch the quiet moment when offering becomes insistence, when love hardens into bargaining and curiosity turns to craving. This is the moment the Stoics called the birth of attachment to outcome, and it is the moment the heart begins to clutch, closing around its own hope like a fist that forgets the joy of the open palm. You might recall a time when you sent a message, perhaps to someone you care about, and then waited, tense and restless, for the reply. Each minute without response shrank your body a little, as if your worth wandered off with the silence. Or you extended an invitation, come walk with me, share this sunset, tell me your story. And when the answer lingered or came back as a polite, maybe another day, your mind began its frantic math, counting every rejection as subtraction from your abundance. Pause and ask, in those restless minutes or hours, who did I become? Was I still anchored in the fullness I have cultivated? Or did I become a servant to an invisible result, afraid to release and watch it float down a river I cannot command? Desire, the Stoics remind us, can be a flame warming when contained, wild and consuming when ungoverned. The art is to hold your wants lightly, to act with clear intention and skill, but never in bondage to yes or no, presence or absence, grasp or reward. Indifference to result is not accidental, nor is it repression. It is a muscle trained in countless small moments, sending a message and then turning your attention wholly elsewhere, giving a compliment without marking it as a debt that must be repaid, making room inside your own mind for both joy and disappointment, not because you expect the worst, but because you are fluent in the language of letting go. Let's enter, now, the subtle landscape where indifference and desire meet your lived daily world. Perhaps you find yourself on the threshold of asking for what you want, whether in romance, in friendship, in work, or even within yourself. You sense a welling up of longing. There is an urge to speak, to reach, to offer, and then the fear that what you offer will fall flat, or worse, vanish into the dark without echo. This is the moment you might practice what I call the ritual of conscious assertion. Formulate your request, your compliment, your gesture in all its specificity and warmth hand. Then, before you extend it outward, pause. Give yourself a breath, maybe 2 or 3, and ask, am I attached to the yes? If so, what would it feel like to offer with an open hand, to regard rejection not as a refutation of self, but as a natural weather system through which I can walk unbroken? Take, for instance, the task of sharing your preferences. I enjoy slow walks at dusk. I crave long conversations more than loud parties. I find quiet mornings richer than busy nights. These are not demands, but invitations. When greeted with indifference or tepid response, you adjust your investment not with bitterness or performance, but with wisdom. You are a gardener, tending the field that welcomes your seeds, but you accept that not all soil is ready or fertile right now. There is dignity in this dignity, in not lowering your standards or betraying your own clarity just to be chosen. You say, in word or gesture, I choose to offer, but I do not beg. This discipline also carries you through the aftermath of an encounter. Suppose you have offered your time, your affection, perhaps a small piece of your vision for the world you wish to share, and the reception is unclear. A maybe, a non-committal smile, a gentle withdrawal. What do you do next? The Stoic path is to reduce, not escalate, your emotional investment in what cannot be guided by your own honest action. You let go with tenderness and without ransoming your presence. You can even formalize this with a small practice. After any such exchange, return to your diary, your sacred private space, and write down not just what happened, but how you responded. Did you press? Did you retract? Did you hold firm within yourself? Name the facts. Name your agency. Name what belongs, forever, to fortune. This is the heart of what Epictetus, the old Roman slave philosopher, whose wisdom lives on in countless small, quiet rooms called the dichotomy of control. Ask yourself each time you are swept by hope or disappointment, what is truly mine to manage? My intention, my clarity, my honesty, the rhythm of my own attention, these are sovereign territory. The reply, the interest, the level of reciprocity, or even the future shape of my connection, these belong not to me, but to the infinite bending of the world. I act where I have power. I rest where I do not. In this space, love becomes cleaner, less freighted by the games of strategy or the calculating hunger of conditional giving. Think back, perhaps, to the last time you were told, maybe another day, when anticipation met the cold air of uncertainty. What if, instead of retreating into resentment or disguised self-punishment, you practiced the Stoics' gentle answer, cordial, light, undiminished. Of course, let's connect when the time is right. And then, without malice or calculation, you stepped forward, back into the life you have constructed by purpose, presence, and self-mastery. No withdrawing the warmth from your gaze, no harsh lines drawn in the sand between accepted and rejected. Only a calm passage through your own weather, the quiet return to the business of living and giving for its own sake. There are words and reminders you can borrow, short mantra-like phrases to anchor the mind in stormier moments. Say to yourself, at the close of each effort, I did what was mine. The outcome is not my burden. Or, as Marcus Aurelius might have whispered on some restless night beneath the Roman sky, the result belongs to fate, not to me. All that is mine is my presence now. The key is not to stifle your longing, but to loosen its grip on your identity, to love, to reach, to strive, without slipping into need. This way of being rewires not only the fabric of your private experience, but the atmosphere around you. In romance, especially, the freedom of calm preference manifests with a rare and magnetic charge. I choose this because it enriches my life. I would love for you to join, but I stay full whether you do or not. The recipient feels, perhaps for the first time in many years, what it is like to be chosen without being pursued, to be wanted but not needed, to be able to decline without being cast as villain or savior. Your desires, articulated without shackling urgency, become invitations, not demands. And as you refine this art, notice how swiftly the ancient games, those endless exchanges of who needs whom, who won or lost, who owed and who forgavaloes their luster. You step quietly away from the theatre of conditionality, that crowded stage where so many exhaust themselves, perpetually measuring, tallying, comparing score. Instead, you enter the still, sunlit clearing of your own agency, where relationships, opportunities, and even disappointments grow green and gold, not because you control the rain, but because you have learned to tend what is yours and release what is not. The very quality of your presence shifts. You are lighter, not because you desire less ardently, but because you are less willing to chain your peace to result. If you have never known this kind of freedom in desire, let me offer you a small invitation. The next time you find yourself anxious about the unfolding of an event, a first date, a job interview, a fragile moment of disclosure, set aside 5 minutes after the experience to reflect. Ask yourself, with radical honesty, what part of this was truly within my influence? How well did I inhabit it? And where did I cross the invisible threshold into compulsive hope, anxious waiting, or hidden self-bargain? Write it down, name it kindly, and then, with a gesture as real as any physical act, let it float away. You are not a slave to results, nor is your joy a payment for performance. Begin to watch for the countless scenes in daily life where indifference to result becomes a gift, not just for yourself, but for all who orbit you. At work, state your position clearly, offer your talents generously, and then do not grind your teeth in the service of recognition you cannot summon by force. In friendship, reach out with warmth, but do not keep score of who called last, who promised what, who owed the next gesture. In romance, flirt, laugh, risk openness, but draw a gentle boundary at the place where chasing would cost you self-regard. When the world answers with silence, or even apparent withdrawal, you offer yourself this small grace. You reduce your investment, not your civility. You remain open to life's return, but your peace is not mortgaged against its timeline. You might, in time, develop small rituals, a control card, divided into actions within your grasp on one side, fortune's wild cards on the other. Place it above your desk, or tucked in a pocket, to remind you that every hour tempts you to confusion about whose business is whose. Or perhaps, after encounters, friendships, or romantic meetings, you sit a while and sort, with deliberate gentleness, what within this was true and under my steering, what rode in on the wings of hope, but then drifted off unsummoned. Each repetition becomes a lesson, not in indifference as neglect, but in the deeper kind of love that wishes well and then bows to the shape of things as they are. Even more powerfully, care for the nervous system of your own desire. Notice when you are bracing, scanning, hungry for reassurances the world cannot promise. In these moments, borrow words from the Stoics to settle your mind. I have stewarded what is mine. I am not in bondage to reply or result. I am allowed now to rest, to restore, to be. This is the practice of slow release, softer than resignation, brighter than cynicism, a warm, steady confidence that takes the long view. If you have found yourself in the patterns of overinvestment or anxious hoping, if you have waited too long by the phone, or reviewed repeatedly what you could have said or done, consider sharing your story in the comments below. There is no shame in longing, only in forgetting that longing is at its best when it serves life, not when it runs your life. What practices have helped you step back from the invisible tug of needing things to go your way? How have you reclaimed the breath and the space that this kind of acceptance makes possible? Your experience, your honest attempts, will surely nourish another who hears and recognizes themselves within your words. This is not, in the end, a renunciation of desire, but a liberation of it. For desire that is freed from the cage of expected result becomes something lighter, more radiant, a force that draws others in rather than pushes them away. In this, there is paradox. When you are no longer ruled by the compulsive urgency of needing to receive, you become more genuinely lovable, more trustworthy, more at ease. And in that ease, relationships of all kinds unfold on the sunlit field of real, sustainable attraction, not on the rocky soil of drama or neediness. May you, tonight or tomorrow, sense the first moments of this freedom, the subtle joy that is possible when you walk toward life open-handed, eager but not grasping, able to care deeply but not forced, to stoop or plead for the gifts that are meant for you alone. As you begin to sense the subtle joy that arises when you walk toward life, with open, hands-careful, attentive, able to care deeply, but no longer cast adrift by the tides of need, something quietly profound starts to take root in the soil of your being. This root has a name, though it is so often misunderstood or wrapped in the garb of harsh commandments. Boundaries, not the fortress walls of an anxious heart intent on keeping the world permanently at bay, not the brittle defenses of those wounded so often that all they know is retreat, but a gentler, older meaning of the word, a recognition that respect for your own shape, your own rhythm, your own needs, is itself the purest architecture of sustainable connection. For in learning to respect yourself not with cold armor, but with clear and elegant lines, you teach the world how to love you and, just as importantly, how not to mistake affection for permission to trespass. Have you ever noticed how those most at ease in themselves seem, paradoxically, also most available to others? How their yes feels vibrant and spontaneous, and their no lands without guilt or sharpness? These are not merely lucky personalities, nor are they merely the products of easy, drama-free lives. Instead, you're witnessing boundaries made visible and made beautiful by practice. In the context of Stoic wisdom, boundaries are not defensive maneuvers, but active declarations of the kind of life worth protecting. They set the stage for all intimacy, all partnership, all mutual becoming, by ensuring that no one, including yourself, is asked to give what they do not freely choose or sustain what erodes their core. This subtle, elegant approach to limits is not just a theory. It lives in the micro moments of your day, in the quiet decisions that shape every relationship and, very often, the very shape of your mood as you drift into sleep. It might be the simple act of declining a message after 10 o'clock in the evening, not as an act of punishment or evasion, but as a gentle defense of the rest you need. It might be the assertive, unembellished no you offer to a commitment that would strain you beyond health, or the wise withdrawal from a triangle of gossip, resentment, or drama where your peace is not valued. In these gestures, you are not walling yourself away from life, but cultivating the very oxygen that communion needs to breathe. Let yourself recall a time when you failed, as we all have, to honor your own limits. Maybe it began with a small concession, the meeting you agreed to out of obligation, the late call answered despite your exhaustion, the third, forgiving acceptance of a slight from someone who takes but rarely returns. At first, the world doesn't notice, but the toll accumulates. Quietly sleep erodes, resentment simmers, the radiant sense of plenty contracts. Soon your yes has lost its savor, and your no is so infrequent that it arrives only laced with frustration or apology. This is the quiet suffering born of boundaryless living, a suffering not dramatic but steady, like a river wearing away at the roots of an old tree. What would it mean, instead, to begin again kindly, with rigor, with the humility of a gardener tending to a living, breathing ecosystem inside your days? The Stoic vision of boundaries demands nothing theatrical. Rather, it asks that you clarify, for yourself and for those you touch, the terms on which you are prepared to meet them. If you love conversation but guard your nights for sleep and for renewal, say sonnet as decree, but as affectionate truth. I adore our talks, but after 10 o'clock, I need to disconnect so I can be truly present tomorrow. Let's pick up where we left off in the afternoon. If someone crosses that line, you reiterate a not coldly, not with escalation, but with a steady and respectful firmness. The world, little by little, learns how to approach your garden. You may notice in yourself the old discomforts that arise when first you claim your dignity, the reflex to justify, to over-explain, to preempt anger or withdrawal from those who found your softness more convenient when it meant always accessible. These are ancient ruts, the inheritance of families, of cultures, of years spent over-adapting for love that always felt conditional. But your boundaries are not for the comfort of others, they are for the protection of the peace that enables you to love freely, deeply, and without scorekeeping. There is a hidden gift inside the ritual of boundary setting, one that reveals itself only when practiced over time. You will find that your clearest, kindest limits do not banish others, they refine your circle. Those who thrive on ambiguity or benefit from your self-erasure will begin to fall away, seeking more porous fields elsewhere. Those who recognize, even with initial surprise, the beauty of a person who says what they mean and means what they say, these will draw closer, finding comfort in your steadiness, your predictability, your refusal to play games. Bit by bit, you become a sanctuary for those who are also willing to love with awareness, and the drama that once exhausted you becomes noticeably absent, like a room aired out on the first day of spring. Imagine, in the ordinary theatre of daily life, being the one whose time is given but never surrendered in haste, whose sleep is shielded not with apology, but with the quiet joy of stewardship. Picture yourself in relationships where invitations to disrespect are met not with counterattack or cold withdrawal, but with the simplest of refusals. That's not something I accept in my life. Notice what happens to your mood, your energy, your ability to offer joy without calculation when you are no longer burning reserves just to survive the assaults of the hour. Boundaries, in this sense, are not the walls that keep life out, but the windows that let only the sweet air in. Of course, real boundaries are not written only in speech. They are inscribed in behavior, often before any words are spoken. You model your limits not only through declaration, but through embodiment. You end your work at the agreed hour, because you value your restoration. You keep your phone out of sight during meals, because presence is your true north. You honor the promises you make to yourself about movement, about nourishment, about the rituals of ending and beginning that shape your day. These acts teach others in a silent, unwavering grammar. The boundaryless life is a space where chaos leaks in through every available seam. The bounded life is a sanctuary not immune from difficulty, but robust, resilient, open to the right storms and closed to needless turbulence. Elegant boundaries, the kind that become magnetic, are neither rigid nor brittle. They flex as needed not from fear, but from a nuanced, living sense of your own evolving needs. There will be days or seasons when you extend yourself further, open the doors of your schedule and your tenderness wide, and then other seasons may be after loss or in illness, or simply in growth where retreat is not only allowed, but necessary. The Stoic teaches not to seek consistency for its own sake, but fidelity to principle. Nothing good is ever born from violating oneself. In this, you learn to bless your own rhythms, to honor the tides of your own capacities, and never to shame yourself for drawing back where, for a time, you once gave freely. To hide in a fortress is a tragedy. To flood the fields carelessly is just as much a loss. What does it look like, practically, when boundaries mature from theory into daily wisdom? You might, For your own clarity, draft a personal contractor handful of sentences, not to be announced to everyone you meet, but to orient your own decisions. I do not allow others to speak harshly to me without reply or consequence. I protect my sleep as the gateway to all that I cherish. I keep relationships free from triangulation. If you bring another's conflict into my presence, I will lovingly redirect you. These lines become touchstones, not straitjackets, a living document that is allowed to evolve as your needs emerge and mature. If you encounter red flags, patterns of dishonesty, chronic disregard, or contempt, you treat them not as puzzles to solve or heroes' quests to endure, but as signals for protective action. Reaffirm your limit. If response shifts, good. If not, you first step away. Then, if harm remains, you close the door. There is no pride in compulsive rescue, nor is there wisdom in enduring where respect is absent. This is not just for you, but for all those whose lives brush up against yours. The more you honor your limits, the more you give unconscious permission for others to do the same. Boundaries also preserve the lifeblood of every healthy connection. Differentiation. In relationships saturated with fusion, where all energy is pooled and all life is lived in the shadow of the other's storms or radiance, desire gasps for air. By maintaining your friendships, your solitary rituals, your private joys, you ensure that love remains not a prison, but a garden where both can breathe. Let there be spaces in your togetherness, Khalil Gibran once wrote, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. The Stoic lives this truth, not in grand pronouncements, but in the gentle maintenance of individuality within union. Let us dwell for a moment in the ambiguity and pain that sometimes arises when boundaries are tested. Maybe you say no and are met with disappointment, anger, or a kind of withdrawal that feels like punishment. The nervous system, attuned by old habits and social training, may feel this as a threat, a crisis of belonging. Remind yourself then that to honor your own boundary in the face of another's dismay is not selfishness, but the precondition for respect. The cost of eternal accommodation is always, eventually, the loss of love's vitality on both sides. Give yourself permission, and also time, to feel the discomfort arise and pass. You are not here to manage others' feelings about your autonomy. Your work is, rather, to be honorable in your delivery, steady in your practice, and loving in your own heart. Perhaps you have stories about the first time you enforced a boundary not with anger, but with clarity, not seeking to wound, but refusing to comply with violation. Maybe someone left, or sulked, or questioned your care. Later, another remained, wrote you a note of gratitude, modeled your courage in their own circle. Over time, you've learned boundaries select who stays and who goes, and life is made richer, not poorer, by these seasons of clarity. You might ask, in your nightly reflection, how did I honor my boundaries today? Where was I clear? Where did I waver? And what helped or harmed me in that moment? Consider sharing these moments in the comments below. Naming your experience, offering your own wisdom or vulnerability, becomes a thread for others to hold on those nights when choosing themselves feels like exile. Remember that boundaries, like all practices, begin new each morning. There is no shame in yesterday's permeability, only the ongoing invitation to align action with value, speech with need, energy with intention. Some days your no will be muted or delayed or come out sideways. Some days your yes will be too quick. Return to the quiet work of gentle correction, apology if needed, rest where depleted, gratitude for the learning. Over time, the arc will bend unmistakably toward integrity. In this lifelong art, you will discover the deepest Stoic lesson, that to love wisely is to refuse to violate yourself, no matter the cost. In doing so, you gift yourself two treasures at once. You become trustworthy in your own eyes, and you become, paradoxically, a lighthouse for all those who seek love that neither consumes nor erases. Let every line you draw, every gate you close, every invitation you issue or decline, be an act not of separation, but of devotion, the quiet, continuous tending that sustains your own roots and allows you, finally, to offer your fruit to the world unspoiled. May you rest tonight in the subtle power that comes when your boundaries are lived, not just spoken. May you wake tomorrow with the steady, warm sense that you belong first to yourself, that everything worth cherishing flows from there. As you allow yourself to rest in the subtle power of boundaries, those silent, living lines that bless your roots and allow you to belong to yourself, maybe, you notice another force, quietly shaping the field of your relationships and your sense of self in the world. It is softer than concrete action, delicate as breath, yet it guides almost every impression you leave upon others, and every meaning you draw from the 1,000 small encounters that thread your days together. This force is the language you use, and the way you inhabit your own bodily, slow choreography of posture and words that become the music of your presence, echoing even when silence has fallen. Language, for the Stoic, is never a mere instrument of persuasion, nor is it a means for dazzling or seducing the world. Rather, it is the vessel that reveals your interior order, clear, calm, coherent. If boundaries are the architecture of respect, then your language is the warm light inside the house. Notice how the most compelling, most trustworthy people you have known often spoke with a kind of deep, unhurried clarity, their words few but chosen, their praise never borrowed from habit, but grown in the soil of specific observation. They did not entice with fireworks of wit or bury you under a blizzard of empty superlatives. Instead, their communication was a current of gentle, focused energy, simple without being sparse, sincere without being heavy, and always alive to the reality of the moment. It can feel difficult, at first, to adopt this mode of speech, and presents a calm, clear, and warm communication, especially if your past has coaxed you to hide behind cleverness or urgency, to bend toward people's imagined expectations, or to inflate your contributions just to secure a moment's notice. But the Stoic path draws you gently back to the basics of candor and containment. It asks, how can you reveal exactly what is needed? No more, no less. How can you, in each encounter, tune your language and posture to transmit not only your message, but your steadiness and your care? You may wish to begin your day with a single, almost sacred commitment, to speak as if you trusted both yourself and your audience, to unveil only as much of your inner terrain as the occasion and your own clarity require. It is not performative, reticent-siding things that matter, living under the shadow of self-doubt. Nor is it grandiose self-revelation spilling every story or emotion just to fill the space. Instead, it is the courage to say, "This is what I feel. This is what I think. Here, too, is what I prefer," and to carry those words in a manner both upright and undemanding. Begin to observe the music of your own voice, its pitch, its rhythm, its habit and pauses. Is your speech hurried, racing from one point to another as if driven by an invisible clock? Or can you slow it, let each phrase land as dew upon the grass, insisting on neither applause nor answer? When you lower your tone, when you inhabit the natural cadence of your breath, you do not just create an atmosphere of calm for others, you invite your own nervous system to rest in the safety of your interiority. A body with loose shoulders, an open chest, a steady gaze, and hands resting in the open, these are not gestures of surrender, but of quiet self-confidence. The world reads your body before it ever hears your words. The way you hold yourself forecasts the kind of self-respect and clarity that makes both yes and no trustworthy. Consider the powerful beauty of specificity. When you offer praise or appreciation, form it around something real, something observed. Say, "I am moved by the way you take time gathering your thoughts before you answer. Your patience gives the conversation quiet depth." Or, "The care with which you curate your home tells a story about your presence." Let your affirmations perforate the fog of generic compliments and become signposts of true attention. In the absence of hyperbole, the simple becomes profound, and trust grows in the space where flattery once lived. Notice, too, the strength of a gentle admission. "I am nervous sharing this, but it feels important to say." Vulnerability in language, when bound by self-respect and clarity, becomes irresistible because it risks nothing that would undermine your own value. Let yourself practice the ancient art of pausing before reply. The Stoic does not fill silence to manage discomfort. He lets silence serve as emphasis, as compost from which the healthiest speech can grow. When conflict arises or confusion, choose an extra breath instead of a quick defense. Say, "Let me consider that," or "Give me a moment to find the right words." In doing so, you honor both yourself and the person in front of you, signaling that haste is never your master, and that the relationship is worthy of slower, more conscious tending. The measured voice, the presence contained in every word, has the unusual power of lowering the flames in heated rooms, just as it can make space for laughter and intimacy when the mood is lighter. There are simple, everyday mantras you may try should your mind or tongue threaten to rush ahead of meaning. Simple, sincere, slow. These words can become both anchor and compass, a triad that keeps you near the heart of what needs to be spoken. And as a gentle technique, echoing back the last word or phrase you heard before you speak softly, without mimicry, signals that you listen, truly. Not only does this foster trust, but it creates space for deeper sharing. The person with you feels reflected and respected, not assailed or interrogated. Body and posture, as extensions of language, deserve their own meditation. When you enter an encounter, whether with a loved one or stranger, bring your body fully into alignment. Unclench your hands, rest them where they can be seen, open your chest, and soften your gaze. The Stoic does not shrink away from connection, nor does he enlarge himself beyond necessity. His body becomes the neutral zone where others can meet him without threat or suspicion. Let your smile be unforced, your nods gentle and infrequent, more acknowledgement than performance. If you sense the urge to self-protect, to cross your arms tightly, to look down, or to dart your eyes past the person present, simply notice, and, without judgment, open again. This is not mere technique. Your entire being can become a safe, warm threshold for those you choose to invite inward. And let us remember, clear communication is not only about what is included, but what is left out. Refrain from "you always" or "you never," from the language of accusation, which renders the other defensive and the conversation brittle. Prefer, instead, "I feel," "I think," "I noticed," or when it rings true, the gentlest, "I prefer." This is the rhetoric of ownership, a language of respect that allows space for others to exist without being defined solely by your needs or story. You might discover, as you walk this path, that the most magnetic moments in any meeting, any conversation, any intimacy, are those graced by both clarity and warmth. Not every word spoken lands gently, but when it rises from a place of non-defensiveness, when your tone signals an unwavering self-trust, the opportunity for reconciliation, for laughter, for real progress multiplies. When others perceive that you do not seek to win, but to understand, not to dominate, but to reveal, not to impress, but to connect, the atmosphere ripens, drama lessens, hearts open, the space fills with new possibility. At times, of course, you will falter. Old patterns will surface: defensiveness, sarcasm, exaggeration, the impulse to talk over, to fill every lull with noise. When you catch yourself, return with humility. Name the mistake if needed. "I realize I spoke too quickly just now. Let me slow down and try again." This is the rhetoric of the adult, a conscious recentering in values, not a play for sainthood, but a gentle demonstration that you too are learning. In doing so, you give others permission to be real, to have their own slip-ups without shame. Observe, quietly and without demand, how the world responds over time. The sharp edges of conflict soften because your words no longer conceal hidden barbs. The drama of misunderstood meaning gives way to the possibility of repair and deepening. Even online, where the impulse to posture and provoke is strongest, you model a novel pace and tone a dialogue without rush, a comment that radiates honesty and respect, a refusal to outshout or outdo for the sake of momentary triumph. The digital world, lacking tone and gesture and breath, badly needs those who can transmit the warmth and order of their presence through text alone. In every new interaction, bear witness to your own posture and phrasing, not with obsession, but with curious, compassionate attention. Choose an example over abstraction, rather than, I am always open-minded. Reveal a time you changed your mind. Replace, I am successful, with a story of challenge and learning. When you do offer praise, allow it to be tethered to observation, to the slow patience of having truly seen someone in their element. If you must name your stumbling blocks, do so lightly. I get nervous when people I care for are silent, but I am working on trusting the quiet. Vulnerability in rhetoric, bounded by dignity and care, is memorable because it is so rare. As you practice this, you may notice your relationships deepening, almost despite your efforts. When you are not rushing to impress or explain, but calmly inhabit what is so, you invite others to relax. When you set your own pace, you allow the conversation to breathe. There's no feast or famine of connection, only the even rhythm of real meeting. This is how trust is built, slowly and surely, neither dramatized nor withheld, but offered as a steady river that carries both you and the ones you love. If you have stories, those moments when a slow, simple word changed a whole dynamic, or when the tone in your body calmed a tension you never thought could ease, consider sharing them in the comments below. What have you found most powerful in your journey toward clear, sincere, and unhurried communication? In which moments did your body or your words surprise you with new clarity, with a warmth you never thought possible, amid conflict or nerves? Your experience, cast into this shared space, may ripple far beyond your own life, becoming instruction and comfort for another soul who, tonight, needs to be reminded of the power they already carry. The true Stoic, in the end, is not silent, but exact. His words are few, but laden with meaning. His posture open, but never demanding. His communication always in service of understanding, rather than domination. Let the language you cultivate and the body that bears it become the signature of your growing integrity. Let it build bridges instead of walls. Let it warm and clarify. Let it bring peace to rooms where once there was only haste or confusion. Speak, write, listen, move as if every word and gesture could be the seed of trust. And then, when the world responds, accept its answer with the same steadiness you have practiced in every other field of your becoming. With each conversation, each moment of silence honored, each posture held with quiet pride, you continue the weaving of a life not only protected by boundaries, but blessed by the warmth and order that careful, attentive, loving communication can offer. As you lay down tonight, recall the soft echo of your words, the rhythm of your own breath, and rest in the knowledge that you have, at least for this day, spoken as one who belongs first to themselves, and from that wellspring has given freely to others. Let yourself feel, even for a moment, the gentle afterglow that remains when you have spent a day choosing your words thoughtfully, moving with intentionality through each encounter, granting the world glimpses of yourself through calibrated language and steady posture, life, where you speak as one who belongs to themselves and gives from that fullness. There is a quiet beauty in this practice, a texture of calm that ripples far beyond words and gestures, seeming almost to shape the very air around you. Yet, as the dusk deepens and the world around you slows, perhaps you notice a dawning intuition that all verbal clarity, all elegant posture, all acts of boundary and assertion are shadowed or illuminated by something yet more ancient and bodily. This, you begin to understand, is the way you inhabit your own physical existence, the mundane, miraculous ways you tend to your vessel, your sleep, and your rhythms. Without this, even the most luminous philosophy is left rootless, floating untethered above the living soil of creaturely reality. Consider, for a while, how your presents your aura, the ineffable magnetism that draws or steadies others near you does not simply arise from concepts or inner work, but is inescapably expressed through the way you animate your body, the care you offer to flesh and bone, the pulse and rest that compose your days. When you feel exhausted, neglected, stretched thin by poor rest and erratic habits, no phrase or bodily pose can conjure what the inner organism refuses to lend. Those who move through life with steady glow, a kind of subtle vital energy, are not only those who think wisely, but those who have learned to tend the secret economies of vitality, how to steward sleep as if it were their most precious currency, how to cultivate strength and ease, not for vanity but as foundation, how to align their days so that surplus, not deficit, is the baseline from which generosity and presence can flow. Let yourself, if you're able, recall the last time you felt truly well in your body. Perhaps it was a morning after a night of deep, undisturbed sleep, your limbs heavy with rest, your mind unhurried and new. Maybe it was the moment you returned from a long walk beneath open sky, your bloodstream still echoing the tempo of your stride, your gaze rinsed clear by wind and distance, or simply that silent, sudden realization sitting at your kitchen table or pausing on the threshold of a room that for this hour, at least, nothing aches, nothing drags, the world inside matches the world outside. Presence, you realize, is never fully attainable, as long as the organism is starved of what it needs to repair and reset. The Stoic insight here is not ascetic self-denial, but humble, biological respect. You are first an animal, before you are a dreamer or a thinker, and your animal needs are not the enemy of higher aims, but the very platform from which all aspiration leaps. There is a dignity quiet but unmistakable in those who have learned to cherish their rhythms. They move neither in clamor for attention, nor in apology for their embodied need. They are predictable, not as a matter of rigid routine, but as a lived promise. You can trust the man or woman who rests at the hour they say they will, who eats not to numb or impress, but simply to sustain, who rises not in chaos but in the gentle order of familiar ritual. Their reliability is magnetic. When they say they will show up, they do so with reserves to spare. When life's waves rise, they do not capsize, because their vessel is not already half swamped by chronic deprivation or overindulgence. Imagine then the small but decisive rituals that can anchor your days and announce to both yourself and the world that you are a steward, not a mere passenger of the flesh you occupy. Picture yourself, for instance, greeting the sunrise not by reaching for urgent novelty phone, the news, the residue of yesterday's unrest, but by standing quietly in the soft light, taking 3 or 4 long conscious breaths, feeling the pulse of your heart after sleep. Maybe you move to a window, greeting the elements whatever they are, letting your eyes adjust before inviting artifice into your mind. With a glass of water, or a stretch, or a short walk, you signal to your organism that survival is not all that matters here. Thriving is desired, and you will make room for it, even in small ways. Or imagine the midday ritual of movement, chosen not for spectacle or comparison, but because you crave what it stirs in you. A simple walk among trees or city streets, a few minutes of mindful stretching, a silent push away from the screen to notice the breath moving in and out. You learn, over time, that presence is refreshed by motion, that the restless hum of anxiety loves to lodge itself in joints and psoas and fascia, and that only through moving what is stuck can you re-enter the world with the freshness you imagine is reserved only for others. When you meet someone habituated to caring for their body in this way, you see how their attention is more available, their humor more robust, their very presence generous without performance. Central to this is the way you approach sleepless as a negotiable afterthought, and more as the cornerstone on which every hour depends. Night after night, you lay down not out of defeat, but as a sacred pause. You mark, perhaps with dim lights and softer sounds, the winding down of the day. You switch off the screens, not out of puritanical self-denial, but because you know what the ancient rhythms of dark and silence do for the pulsing machinery of mind and spirit. If you struggle with the art of slowing down, let ritual guide you. Brush your teeth with focus, write 3 thoughts in a simple notebook, address what lingers, and then lay it down. In this, you teach your nervous system that recovery is safe, welcomed, and never shameful. For many, the landscape of food is fraught anxiety, compulsion, performative restriction, careless excess. The Stoic approach is not one of punishment, but of discerning service, eating not merely to fuel, not to distract or sedate, but to honor the awesome labor of the organism. You may choose, gently, to observe your own responses to meals. What brings clarity? What brings inertia? What colors your mood long after the taste is gone? Sometimes you fast not as a gauntlet, but as a friendly reminder that hunger is not always an emergency, that discipline is a source of hidden pleasure and not only a burden. At other times, you feast with gratitude and attention, allowing celebration its proper place, but never confusing abundance with wildness. The care of dopamine, this silent, often invisible architect of your focus, and joyous, perhaps the most modern of the ancient lessons. Devices, feeds, the endless scroll of novelty and outrage each tugs at your brain's reward systems, draining presence, fragmenting attention, exhausting reserves you might have spent on friendship, work, or quiet invention. You make the simple but radical choice, perhaps one day a week, to fast from all screens, giving yourself back the slow conversation, the hum of nature, the chance to re-encounter your own wandering thoughts. Or at night, you bracket the use of luminous rectangles, letting dusk reacquaint you with the ancient organic textures of candlelight, the animal sigh of rest. If there is a triad of practice that enlivens and strengthens the roots of a Stoic body, it might be this: some sweat, some sunlight, some silence, each and every day. You might break a sweat in joyful movement, or simply by walking briskly down a shaded street. You offer your skin and your eyes the clean, golden clarity of unfiltered light. You choose moments where no input is allowed, where the mind is left to drift, process, daydream. Each completes the circuit, replenishing the delicate balance of vitality that drama and conflict so easily drain. Notice, in the midst of building these rituals, how your mood and character both transform. A body regularly exercised, rested well, and tended without obsession becomes not only more attractive, but more trustworthy, first to yourself, then to those you love. The warmth in your gaze, the readiness in your smile, the steadiness of your hand, these are not accidents, but the compounding effects of tending to physical needs with the steadfastness you grant to purpose and philosophy. Let yourself, as you move through work and rest, observe without condemnation the slips and excesses. There will be nights when the call of another episode, another article, another anxious scroll wins out over the promise made to yourself. There will be mornings when discipline feels thin. This too is the body's way of instructing you. Use these moments not for shame, but for learning. What price did you pay for the extra hour awake, the missed walk, the heavy meal? And, when you honor your commitments instead, notice the silent, unspoken dividend. You are more available. You bend, but do not break. You arrive at your meetings and relationships not as a ghost, Instead, the invitation is subtle and lived. Would you like to meet for a morning walk, a stroll by the market, a slow meal cooked with care? Would you like to join in experiences that enliven rather than dull, nourish rather than deplete? Your invitations blend movement, reflection, and connection, so that even the act of coming together becomes restorative, not draining. In such a life, delight and discipline along thought to be enemies become collaborators, each amplifying the joys of the other. You might wonder sometimes if all this tending to body and rhythm, all this silent ritual and seemingly unremarkable consistency could ever really be a form of charisma or magnetism. Yet, those who belong most to themselves, who steward hunger, rest, movement, and attention, emit a kind of subtle pheromone, an energy that lingers in a room, that changes the way others relax in your presence, that makes promises more believable and intimacy safer to receive. It is as if the body itself signals, here is someone who will not use you for rescue, who will not collapse or betray their own needs, and therefore yours. Here is someone who is safe, not only in conversation, but in silence, not only in excitement, but in the slow, regenerative drift of ordinary days. And if you have found your own way back to ritual after seasons of neglect, consider sharing this process in the comments below, in your conversations, in the small acts with which you end and begin the day. What habits restored your sense of wholeness? Which simple actionsless coffee, more light, a hard boundary around bedtime, a walk at noonhave made your presence more vibrant, not only for yourself but as a silent offering to those you care for? There is deep solidarity in these admissions, and a gentle humility attends every ongoing attempt. You need not become a monk, an athlete, or an ascetic to find your way to this embodied stoicism. Let your rituals be small enough to survive the rough weather of weak willpower or crowded schedules. It is the thread that counts the daily tiling not of perfection, but of intention, a life in which your body bears witness to the same values that organize your mind. As the seasons change, as your needs shift, let your routines change, to adjust, realign, rest when you need it, surge forward when energy allows. This is how you build not just discipline, but mercy, not just routine, but an atmosphere of care that becomes unmistakable to anyone drawn into your orbit. And so, as you settle into night, breathe into the knowledge that the way you care for this body, for your rhythms, for your rest, is not a footnote to the work of becoming, but its very heart. It is in the shine of your eyes, the softness of your jaw, the steady pulse at your wrist. It is in the invitations you offer, the promises you keep, the laughter and comfort you can hold.
By tending to your body as the vessel for your soul's journey, you arrive at each conversation, each passion, each act of love, as someone who truly belongs first to yourself, and by that belonging as a true gift to the world.
And as you inhabit this space of quiet stewardship, your body gently cared for, your sleep honored, as the sanctuary from which presence and generosity spring perhaps, you begin to sense how your very way of being shapes more than the boundaries of your own day. It reaches out into the lives that brush against yours, as surely as a tree's roots silently stabilize the hillside for all nearby growth. If you were to ask yourself what truly lingers after each encounter, what quietly draws trust or kindles affection, you might discover that beyond eloquent words or even steady presence, there is a subtler energy that connects us, the way in which you give of yourself to others. It is not a spectacle or a performance. It is the understated intentional generosity that springs from wholeness rather than lack, and its ripples are deep, often unnoticed, yet unmistakable. This is the Stoic flavor of generosity, that which possesses no undertone of debt, no shadow of expectation, no hidden scorecard tallying what you are owed in return. Generosity, in its simplest form, is the willingness to offer value time, patience, knowledge, resources, presence freely and appropriately, trusting the universe to balance what you cannot and should not measure. For unfortunately, many of us have been taught that giving must advertise itself to be real, or that help creates an obligation. Still others have been wounded by the kind of generosity that arrives in a cloak of self-promotion, or is so extravagant, so performative, that it makes the receiver uneasy. True generosity, however, flows quietly. It is woven into the very fabric of daily life, and it reveals its beauty most in the small, unheralded moments far from witness and applause. Consider for a moment what it means to show up for another in this way. You notice a friend's fatigue, and, without pronouncement, prepare them a cup of tea. You share a resource or insight because it might help, not because it proves your worth or secures your standing in their eyes. A neighbor struggles with their burden, and you lift only what you can easily carry, never shaming them for needing help nor shaming yourself for offering only what is sustainable. Or perhaps you sense the beginning of romancy, an opportunity to bring something thoughtful, not costly or grand, but an act that says, I see you, and within my capacity, I offer this part of myself. A book that changed you, a meal made with honest hands, the warmth of walking someone home in silence. Each act, small as it may be, is a quiet current. Its purity is preserved not merely by good intention, but by the care that you do not give to earn, to acquire, to manipulate, or to build an invisible bank of IOUs. Stoic generosity is not compulsive. It is never about the erasure of your own needs. It flows from the same well as your boundary set by your self-respect. You are there for others when and where you truly can be, not as a martyr anxiously tending every fire, but as a gardener giving water from a full jug, never draining yourself to dust. Longing for acknowledgement is human. But the man or woman who can offer value without need for applause, who can perform small kindnesses privately, without advertising, achieves a dignity that becomes radiant in the minds of those around them. Over time, your quiet consistency creates trust. Your presence associates itself, not with the feeling of indebtedness, but with the subtle assurance that you give what you are able and will never demand a price when one is not freely offered. Sometimes, this means you give something intangible and even more precious. Your time becomes a gift, not the frantic, multitasking kind, but intervals of undivided focus. When someone speaks, you listen with your whole being, resisting the urge to correct, advise, or shift the conversation toward your own troubles. This is generosity of attention, perhaps the rarest commodity of all, in a time that constantly fragments us. At other moments, it is your competence or insight that you pass forward, connecting a new acquaintance to an opportunity, guiding a friend through a life decision, because you have been where they now stand, not because you crave authority, but because silence in the face of someone else's need would diminish your own soul. Let yourself examine your own motivations before giving, whether objects, wisdom, favors, or time. Pause a moment and ask, am I offering from fullness or from emptiness? Is there a silent bargain within me? A string I hope will be pulled in return. You will know the answer in your body. True generosity feels light, an exhalation, an expansion. Compulsive or manipulative giving feels tight, contracted, underscored by anxiety. It is better to offer less, but purely, than to shower others with gifts grown rancid by expectation. Practice, if you wish, the simple rituals that encode healthy giving into your days. When you have knowledge or insight, share it without prelude or footnote, and without circling back for thanks. If you lend something, state the terms kindly, set your intention, and then let it go. No reminders, no running tally, no disappointment if it is not returned, unless its loss would truly wound you. And when you sense someone's need colliding with your own limits, offer what is sustainable, with clarity about what you cannot or will not continue. Let your generosity be measured by continuity, not grandiosity. By your presence over time, not spectacular single gestures. In relationship, especially as romance flickers and grows, this principle of offering without ledger becomes a source of quiet magnetism. Instead of overwhelming a partner with gifts or constant service, you might notice a simple, personal gesture, sending the image of a place you would like to share, adjusting plans to ensure their comfort, recalling some detail they revealed in passing, and weaving it, unseen, into your next encounter. The people who draw us most powerfully are not those who nest every act of kindness in the drama of their own fatigue, or are always quick to mention their contributions. Instead, they give with the same seriousness and discretion with which they would tie a shoe. Messy, necessary, unnoticed by the world, but unmistakably grounding when needed. Generosity can, and often must, be bounded. Beware the temptation to become the fixer, who is always available, who solves problems before being asked, who secretly hopes that appreciation or belonging will flow in as payment for services rendered. The Stoic gives only from the surplus, never from the stores needed for their own strength or well-being. They know that sometimes the greater act of service is to step back, to withhold the gesture that would infantilize the other, or to say, I can do this much, but after that, you're on your own, and I trust you to grow from the process. There is generosity in faith, in the competence and dignity of others. If you reflect upon your own life, you may notice how resistance to undesired debt is almost universal. Few people respond well to being owed without their consent, and fewer still feel intimacy deepen when generosity is wielded as evidence of virtue. Notice this impulse, perhaps carried from childhood or former relationships, the subtle rehearsing of your favors, the mounting of your private evidence that you are due kindness or recompense. The Stoic observes this tendency with gentle amusement and lets it pass, like a cloud above a mountain. For each act given with a ledger hardens the receiver or prompts invisible withdrawal, often undoing the very connection you hope to build. What then does true generosity gift to the world? It offers a sanctuary free of the pressure of repayment. The friend who insists on nothing, whose presence is steady and resources quietly available, becomes the one to whom others return for comfort, advice, laughter, rest. In a world desperate for loyalty without cost, for tenderness without spectacle, this is gold. In love, this creates not the romance of heroic sacrifice or dramatic rescue, but a mature, sustainable companionship, each person free to bless the other with what overflows, each unconcerned with tallying who has carried more weight this week or this year. There are techniques you may use, small tools for mindful giving. Ask yourself, especially when the impulse to give is strong and the stakes are high, whether your offering is from inside, drawn from your abundance of experience, of joy, of knowledge, from outside, pulled from energy you have yet to recover, from time you do not wish to spend. Notice, too, if your generosity is, on the clock, limited to a specific window, so you do not overcommit and breed inner resentment. Lastly, offer without audience. Let the gesture be its own reward. The Stoic does not trumpet their virtue, nor undermine their gifts with a running narration. They move through the world like light, filtered through trees present, nurturing, but always unconcerned with how it lands or who takes notice. Reflect, if you'd like, on moments when the smallest acts given discreetly have shifted the emotional tone of a gathering, a relationship, a project. Maybe you've been the one to drop off a needed meal in silence, or offer a key connection that altered someone's fortunes, or to pass forward a hard-won insight to someone struggling a few steps behind you. Share, if you are comfortable, these stories in the comments below. There is no audience but those seeking wisdom, no reward greater than the knowledge that good done quietly multiplies in unseen ways, and there are times when the Stoic must withdraw, even in the presence of real need. Not every call for help is answered, for the inner balance which allows lasting, meaningful generosity is itself a precious and finite resource. You might say, I am not available for that right now, but I care, or offer a smaller temporary solution in place of the grand rescue you cannot or should not attempt. Respect your own limits fiercely, and notice how this models self-respect for those around you, empowering them in turn to honor their boundaries as well. At its best, generosity is an aesthetic, a kind of beauty that infuses the plainest acts with quiet radiance. There is nothing louder than a gift given from hidden abundance, nothing lovelier than competence and kindness offered without expectation. To see someone quietly serve their community, mentor a friend, host a simple gathering, or teach what they have mastered all without applause or announce mentis to encounter a beauty more enduring than fashion or wealth. Moral beauty is real, and it is always attractive. It softens the hard edge of modern competition and reminds us that abundance is, at heart, a communal achievement, never a solitary boast. You are invited, now and always, to give as your surplus allows, to pause as your limits demand, to refuse the theatre of generosity, and instead to make of your life a gentle current that nourishes by proximity and never by force. And as the days lengthen or shorten, as those you love come closer or drift for a while, let your offerings remain unburdened, simple, timely, and free of strings. This is the unnoticed miracle of meaningful connection. It does not announce itself, and yet, by its very nature, it cannot be forgotten. May you rest tonight having offered what you could, from the wellspring of your own genuine overflow, and may you trust that in doing so, you have built not a ledger, but a network of quiet belonging, a web sturdy enough to catch joy and bear sorrow, reaching always further, invisible and vital as the roots beneath your feet. And as you begin to notice how your acts of quiet generosity might become the invisible roots of connection, a web of belonging, built out of gentle, unobtrusive gestures, you may find your awareness turning, almost naturally, toward the fields and hollows of your own daily environment. Where do you rest your eyes when you return at sundown, seeking not just shelter, but replenishment? Where does your gaze settle as you greet your mornings? How does the space around you, with its subtle forms and silences, either nurture or deplete your deepest reserves? If generosity is the secret thread in your relations, then the very shape of your surroundings, the way you inhabit your physical world, adorn your body, and curate your daily scenes quietly reveals the depth of your self-respect and readiness for encounter. This is the aesthetic dimension of Stoicism. It is the art of simplicity, the deliberate crafting of an atmosphere in which both your mind and your interactions can breathe, uncluttered and whole. Visualize just for a moment walking into a room that has been arranged with care, not with extravagance or display, but with a purposeful clarity. The furniture is chosen not to impress, but to serve. The light falls softly, illuminating without harshness. Every object is well kept and meaningful, and there is space around things. A sense of permission for the mind to expand without colliding into noise or chaos. A single plant draws the eye, living and humble. A book rests upon a table, its pages lightly worn. There is air to move, a surface to write, a chair to withstand nothing unnecessary crowds these gifts. This is not a stage set for admiration. It is an invitation to presence, a visual extension of the very inner simplicity you have cultivated through all the practices of Stoic life. You have likely felt the contrast between such places and their opposites. The rooms so brimming with stuff, with forgotten obligations and half-buried projects, that it becomes difficult even to think, let alone to rest, to love, to be fully received. How often has a cluttered environment pulled your mind into agitation or fatigue, carrying the residue of distraction into your relationships? The Stoic does not eliminate for the sake of suffering, but so that each chosen thing, each item of clothing, each object at home, each mark upon a calendar, serves and supports the art of living well. When you reduce the background noise, your emotions naturally quiet. Your thoughts find a slower cadence. Your attention settles, ready to be given more purely. Clothing, too, becomes a language spoken without words with, which you declare who you are to yourself and to the world. The Stoic does not chase fashion's winds or armor themselves in excess. Instead, you gather a capsule wardrobe, fewer pieces, each chosen for comfort, fit, and alignment with your temperament. Neutrals and layers, perhaps, gentle fabrics, one or two accessories that tell a story rather than compete for attention. You are not a billboard, but a garden fence. Boundary and invitation, coherence without spectacle. Walk through your home and notice what truly contributes to your sense of self, and what only adds weight or compromise. Does that surface, be it a desk, a table, a window sill, offer tools for your rituals, or distractions from your being? Are the colors you live with gentle as rain, or do they crowd your senses with neediness? Do you keep on display only the gifts and artifacts that draw you closer to your values? A candle, a favorite photograph, a well-loved painting, a meaningful objector have the ornaments of another's expectations, the remainders of unfinished transactions, encroached upon your sacred ground? Each day, the act of curation repeats, one thing in, one thing out. Each new acquisition is an active choice, an invitation to revisit what may be allowed to leave. And when it comes time to offer hospitality, to welcome another into your intimate space, consider the grace of minimalism not as austerity, but as the foundation for warmth. You may light a candle, sweep the surface clean, let the air circulate, place a bowl of fresh fruit at the center. Conversation blooms not from opulence, but from the trust engendered by a clean and coherent environment. You find joy not in apologizing for dust or distracted by broken things, but in receiving and being received within a home, however modest, shaped by mindful edit and gentle presence. What matters is not expensive taste, but the simplicity that makes possible the deep work of showing up for another and for yourself. When you do venture out to share a meal, to meet a friend, to pursue romance, notice how your choice of environment supports or undermines your intentions. Choose spaces with sturdy, steady tables, with lighting that flatters faces, inviting softness and openness, with acoustics that preserve conversation instead of drowning it in clatter. Seek out spaces that shelter you as you are. Not the loudest bar, not the flashiest restaurant, but the quiet coffee shop, the park bench under dappled sun, the little room where nothing competes with attention for center stage. To select your surroundings so intentionally is itself an act of leadership, a demonstration that you cherish experiences above performance. Sometimes, the most powerful simplicity is found in your rituals of transition, putting away your tools at the end of the day, clearing the workbench before supper, turning off the barrage of digital prompts so that your rest may be undisturbed. Let there be places in your home and your calendar that are sacred to silence, where no device intrudes, where no burden is stored, where even your own thoughts can be put down for a while. To honor silence visually, to create visual space, is to allow for the renewal that your mind and relationships crave. You may wonder, particularly in a culture that often equates abundance with success, whether this commitment to simplicity and negative space is not just another form of rigid control or joyless denial. But watch what happens to your peace, to your relationships, to your internal dialogue, when your days unfold against an uncluttered backdrop, when beauty arises not as spectacle, but as a quality of order, intention, and gentle restraint. The eye relaxes, the heart slows, the hungry ache for more softens into contentment with enough. There is elegance in restraint, a rare pleasure in the dignity of having chosen with care. Preserving this aesthetic is not about arriving at perfection or policing yourself ruthlessly, but about embracing the constant dance of invitation and release. Each time you notice that an object, a piece of clothing, an old commitment no longer serves your well-being, you thank it for its season, then return it to the world for someone else to enjoy. For every item that comes into your life, be it physical, emotional, or digital practice, the gentle ritual of one in, one out. In this way, you build a life that is not only manageable, but welcoming. A life that nourishes rather than distracts, that supports rather than contradicts your deeper values and aspirations. And so too, your digital spaces require curation. Trim your feeds, silence unworthy notifications, erase the residue of the countless voices that clamor for your precious, finite attention. Allow your inbox, your apps, your browser to become not barren, but purpose-fuel each message or channel there because you choose, not because you have surrendered your will to the world's algorithms. In doing so, you restore to yourself the right to choose where your mind and spirit are spent. This pursuit of simplicity radiates beyond the home, the wardrobe, the calendar. You can carry it into your ways of relating, your conversations, your emotional self-talk. Rather than offering a torrent of words, you learn to value pauses, to adorn silence as you would a well-placed lamp in a hushed room. Your relationships no longer require constant performance or documentation. You discover that intimacy emerges most fully in moments where neither party strives to fill the air, but is content to be, to regard, to listen. What is gained by all this? At its deepest level, a simple visual and material life offers you a kind of honest refugee sanctuary of coherence and peace from which to meet the world's turbulence. It is easier to reflect, to love, to repair, when your surroundings do not mirror chaos, but whisper of intention and calm. Your space tells a story about your self-regard, about the kind of living you believe is worthy of your brief years. And when others step into your environment, the vibration of that story teaches, without need for words. Perhaps you would share, as others have, the objects you keep for beauty and meaning: a single piece of art, a plant, a journal, a handmade mug. Or you might offer your own lessons learned from the long process of letting go. What was hard to part with? What surprised you by its lasting comfort? What opened up once the crowded shelves and closets were set free? If you do, in comments or in the silent journaling of your evenings, honor those decisions not with pride, but with gratitude. Each act of letting go is both a remembering and a declaration that your life is not for storage, but for presence. To live with a visual, spatial, and emotional simplicity is no guarantee against pain, nor does it promise uninterrupted ease. But it does offer you sanctuary clearings in the thicket where you may rest, recover, and listen for the signals of your deeper self. These oases of chosen emptiness, however transitory, are the grounds of your resilience and your hospitality alike. And, at last, let yourself notice that as you simplify your space, your digital inputs, your wardrobe, and your daily rites, the allure that rises from your presence becomes quietly magnetic. People sense when you have nothing to prove, when you are not secretly seeking applause for your taste or your mien. Instead, they meet a person who invites them to exhale, to take up space, to slow down, to feel worthy of something unhurried and honest. In this contrast, the rare refuge you embody against the world's clutter and noise there grows an attraction that needs no fanfare. This is the seduction of order, the eros of sovereignty, the subtle promise that anyone in your company will be greeted, not with overwhelm, but with the gift of calm visual, emotional, spiritual. So rest tonight in your chosen space, however humble. Let your body soften into the clean sheets and tidy corners you have carved out. Know that in this curation of environment and rhythm, you have built not only a home, but a signaler call for those who long for gentleness and coherence, for beauty free from excess, for the quiet gravity of someone who has made space, at last, to really live. If you rest this evening in the clarity and gentle invitation of your space possibly feeling, perhaps for the first time in many seasons, that you are not just surviving, but truly arriving in your own life, surrounded by intentional beauty and the quiet certainties of what to let in and what to let go, heart may open to yet another level, one which, though deeper, cannot be manufactured or planned. For you sense clearly that all the practices that have come before self-mastery, aligned purpose, practiced presence, elegant boundaries, calm communication, ritual care of your body, discreet generosity, and the sanctuary of simplicity ask, ultimately, to serve something even grander and more daring. They are the fertile soil. But what exactly are you prepared to plant there? What seeds do you gather courage to share, knowing some will fall on rocky ground, others in hidden waiting furrows? What are you willing to risk, not in pursuit of performance, but in devotion to the honest flowering of love, dignity, and meaning? So, as the days stretch or shorten around you, reflect for a moment on the rare and necessary marriage between courage and tenderness, the fusion that, perhaps more than any skill or ritual or restraint, even when the cost is real. You can feel it physically, the slight quickening of your pulse, the sensation of skin warming at the edge of vulnerability, the knot of the unknown. It is here that life arches forward, sometimes trembling, sometimes steady, asking not only for the discipline to endure, but for the willingness to reveal, to risk tenderness amid uncertainty, to step into the light of relational truth. Courage, in this context, is anything but the absence of fear. It is the will to name and move toward what you desire, what you value, what you are unwilling to simply accept by default. It is the willingness to say, I want to see you again, how about Thursday evening? Or, I feel a longing for something deeper than just casual meetings. Is this something you want too? It is the bravery to insist, kindly and cleanly, on your own boundaries, not out of coldness, but as a gesture of honor to yourself and those you meet. To speak your truth, I am struggling with jealousy, and I would like to talk about it. Or, this pace isn't right for me. I care, but I cannot live well in ambiguity, is to offer the other both the gift and the risk of your unvarnished presence. Your voice may shake, your heart may drum wildly in your chest, but you speak anyway, because to refuse this honesty would be to shrink, to evaporate from your own story. Yet, there is a common trap here, and it has ensnared more seekers of depth than almost any other. For often, with newfound backbone or hard-won clarity, the pendulum swings toward a kind of armored confession, a sharing that wounds or exposes for its own sake. The Stoic, however, knows that the greatest beauty in vulnerability is inseparable from discernment. You reveal not everything, nor do you press it all at once onto a reluctant listener. The courage lies not in bearing your soul indiscriminately, but in sharing what is truly necessary for the relationship to breathe and deepen. Your self-disclosure is always guided by context, by intuition, by the mutuality of risk. And just as you present your truths with dignity, you carry the same respect in receiving those of other, listening not to fix or to interrogate, but to honor the fragility and strength in every confession. Here, tenderness becomes not weakness, but a daily manner of being, a willingness to recognize and gently hold moments of uncertainty, backlash, sorrow, or awkwardness. It is to apologize when you are wrong, and to receive apology never as a mere performative gesture, but as the bridge across uneasy distance. Courage invites you to call out, "This isn't quite working for me, and here's what I hope for instead." Tenderness provides the balm, the willingness to reassure, to slow down, to amend, rather than abandon. It is possible and might be the greatest erotic and soulful arto join these, to desire and to admit, to set limits and to nurture, to reach for more and to acknowledge you do not possess the map for every mile ahead. Within this dance, you will inevitably encounter the friction and testing that reveal the depth, not just of your words, but of your character. Picture the evening when, after declaring your hope for something more exclusive, the reply is delayed, ambiguous, or even negative. Your first impulse might be anger or retreat, but courage tempers reaction, chooses instead to stand graceful, neither collapsing nor attacking. You thank the other for their candor and, if need be, walk away upright, knowing you did not contort yourself to be chosen, nor did you make belonging dependent on being right, on being perfect, or on another's readiness. There are other nights late, private, vulnerable when the habitual walls dissolve, and you sense some old fear or insecurity rising. Perhaps you fear that your needs will be too much, or your wounds too unattractive, or that to name your longing for commitment, kindness, even certainty will cost you a precious connection. Here again, the mature Stoic offers himself or herself fully, neither shrinking nor grandstanding. You say when true, "It matters to me that we communicate through our difficulties. I want to grow here, even when it feels risky." Or, "I cannot stay where my needs are invisible. I do not require perfection or endless reassurance, but honesty and effort." This is not demand. It is a pledge to yourself to inhabit life bravely, choosing disappointment or even loss over stagnation, and the quiet devastation of a life unlived. Some may think that this kind of courage must harden the heart or make every encounter contentious, but in reality, it opens space for real intimacy to unfold. The steady pulse of your forthrightness signals to others that you are willing to do your part, shoulder the awkward or the difficult in pursuit of something real. And this steadiness, repeated day after day, weaves a fabric strong enough to weather the inevitable storms, misunderstandings, slow seasons, the friction of two imperfect lives seeking harmony. You permit yourself to both stand and to yield, to ask your partner, friend, or loved one what they need in moments of conflict, and to shape a solution that is not just convenient, but honorable. And when hurt happens as it must, even in the kindest of connections you return, not with blame or withdrawal, but with the quiet authority of one willing to repair. You say sincerely, "I am sorry for how I acted. I see how it landed with you, and I regret it." Or, sometimes, you hear these words and open yourself to receiving them not as conquest, but as a necessary flow for sustaining connection. Maturity is not the perfection of behavior, but the refusal to let harm calcify into resentment or distance. Over time, the courage to initiate, to clarify, to apologize and forgive fertilizes the ground for trust, not the brittle loyalty born of fear, but the supple, generative trust that allows both to grow as themselves. It takes no effort in these days to find examples of performance connection where gestures are made, masks are worn, entire relationships are staged for the approval of others or for fleeting validation. In a world of public declarations and competitive intimacy, the courage to be ordinary, to be unguarded, to risk without guarantee, is rare and precious. What builds enduring eroticism, lifelong respect, and the capacity to weather all seasons together is not an endless novelty or drama, but the daily courage to keep choosing, to keep revealing, to keep shaping a partnership out of explicit, living choices. Life will ask you sometimes to make that hardest of declarations. This is not what I want, even though I care deeply. Courage is to let relationships go that cannot accommodate your truth. Tenderness is to part without cruelty. Together, they write the only kind of ending that preserves dignity for both. Or you may be called to stay and recalibrate, to stretch for patience where you are met with effort or contrition, to endure discomfort for the sake of a longer, richer journey. Only you can discern when steadiness serves growth and when clinging would be defeat in disguise. If you sense within yourself the longing to be more courageous, more real, more transparent, more devoted to the active labor of love perhaps, begin with micro-practices. The next time you find yourself hedging, stalling, refusing to ask for what you earnestly crave, pause and rehearse the simplest, bravest version. I want to see you. I am nervous but interested. I feel distant. Can we slow down and check in? Practice too the subtle arts of care, to touch a shoulder, to meet a worried glance, to offer a word or gesture of support in times of strain. None of these are trivial. Each is a knot in the invisible net that catches both in moments of joy and suffering. It is a myth that the Stoic must stand alone, unruffled and untouchable. True presents true gravitas, lent not by impermeability, but by the willingness to remain available, embodied, and honest in every aspect of encounter. You become the one to whom others look, not because you never err or never weep, but because you show, over years and disappointments, that you do not abandon your own truth or the shared project of growing together. Your signature is honesty. Your rhythm attuned by kindness, your appeal deepened by the knowledge that your affection is never a trap, but always a choice. You may wish tonight, or on some quiet morning soon to write your own pledge of relational courage. I will speak what is real for me, even when it is frightening or uncertain. I will honor my capacity and my limits. I will risk, when called to, the small discomforts that make greater delight and trust possible. I will not apologize for longing, nor will I weaponize it. I will offer what tenderness I can. I will let go when clinging is shameful for both. Let these words bend and grow with you, never fossilized, but returning with each new relationship, each new threshold of growth. And as others witness you living in this way steadfast, vulnerable, and honorable, they will naturally reshape their own dance with risk, depth, and repair. You become, quietly, the friend, the lover, the parent, the colleague, whose presence is felt not merely as comfort, but as invitation, a call to courage in others, a reassurance that even hard truths can be weathered together and emerge as stronger threads in the tapestry of connection. May you find rest tonight in the steadiness forged by your own bravery, in the warmth guarded by your own essential vulnerability. May you rise tomorrow, prepared, above all, to live with the courage to unveil yourself, and the tenderness to hold others as they reveal themselves to you. For in this dance, there is the only true foundation for love that is not just thrilling, but durable. A partnership, a friendship, a legacy, woven one, honest, brave, and gentle day at a time.